My name's Joel, pronouns he, him. I'm talking to you a little bit about our service, which is Southampton Advice and Representation Centre, the SARC, I'm going to shorten it to, where we're going to hopefully be able to offer some support about benefits advice. So what I want to do is tell you a little bit about who we are, a little bit about what we do. I've got a couple of examples with kind of nice anonymised details of some people we supported, some practical examples. A little bit of information about how to contact us, and then we've got room for kind of questions or queries. So that's us, that's the building, or at least the outside of it. We're on the other side of the city from here in Woolston, in the old public baths building. But we are very happy to see people who live anywhere in the city. In the old days, in the before times, before the pandemic, we would do some outreach where we visit other offices as well. We haven't quite been able to get that up and running, but we do offer support on the phone or by appointments by video link, as well as being able to come in and see us face to face. As long as the difficulty that someone's having is with benefits, so they're entitled to benefits, or a problem with their employer, so a problem at work, we're hopefully the right people to help. So we offer free, expert support with those two areas. I'm going to just explore in the rest of this talk a little bit about what they mean. So start off with our benefits work, which I think is probably the biggest part of what we do. We do want to offer support right the way through. That might be about advice on what entitlement people might have, what it's possible to claim. Then, of course, the claiming process, and anyone who's been through the benefits claiming process might understand that the forms are not great. We're stuck with the forms we've got, but what we have is some of the expertise and some of the context to be able to help people understand the rules behind what the questions are asking. And of course, if the Department of Work and Pensions doesn't make the right decision, which it doesn't a lot of the time, then we will certainly help with people right the way through to the independent tribunal appeal process. So we're helping people to know what they might be able to claim, helping them apply, and then helping make sure that they're going to be able to get the support that they're entitled to. That's our focus, that's where we want to go. And if it's something that isn't directly up our street, for instance, there might be another issue that's kind of going along as well, maybe a housing-related issue or a debt-related issue. Although we're not specialists in that, we're very happy to signpost people towards some of our other partners and organisations in the city, whoever that might be. We do a lot of work at the minute with No Limits, who I haven't looked. I'd be surprised if they're not downstairs. But yeah, specialist young people support charity, absolutely. I know what people's experience is. The benefit system is kind of complicated. I think that's fair. It isn't very easy to understand or go through it. And that is, as someone who I think was neurotypical and doesn't have any, touch wood, significant health problems or difficulties, isn't particularly disadvantaged, and it's my job and I've been doing it for 14 years. But it's still pretty complicated. But having support from people like us who know how the system works can hopefully be really helpful in guiding people through it. I think one of the big things I want to put out there as a message is, despite what you kind of get told in the media, whether that's on social media or out in the newspapers or even on TV, every year there is much more in unclaimed benefit out there than ever disappears off of people who are claiming wrongly, claiming that something they shouldn't be. Every year there's a lot more left because people are worried about how to get the support. They don't know what sort of support is out there, or they tried and some civil servant from the department said, no, not having it, and they finished the process there. We'd like to help the government spend the money that it puts out there for it. If they don't spend it on what they've allocated it for in benefits, they haven't got better things to spend it on. You can see the sorts of things that politicians will spend their money on if we give them free rein. So they budget to have all this support out there that's available, just making sure we can connect the people who need it with the support in the right way. Knowing about the kind of support that can be available is hopefully really useful. So there are two benefits I wanted to explore a little bit in outline that might be relevant for some of us. And one of them is, you'll see it there, the one ring to rule them all benefit, universal credit. Okay? So, universal credit is something we're getting used to. Now it's replaced a bunch of different benefits. It's history, you don't need to care about that. It's for people who are thinking about this conference here, going to be 18 or over, and it's going to include people who aren't able to work at all because of the extent of their disability or because of the extent of the barriers that are there. Or maybe because of their additional needs. Absolutely they can work, but it will only be able to be kind of quite part-time unless there's someone without any limitations or restrictions on their health or without any additional needs. As well as paying an amount towards people's kind of living costs in terms of day-to-day budgeting, it also can offer support towards people paying their rent. And if people have additional costs because of having children of their own, then it can help pay towards those as well. One thing to bear in mind is that it's a benefit that will always make people claim together if they're part of a couple that's living together. So whilst a lot of the time the focus is going to be on the individual, sometimes it might be on their partner if they're in a relationship where they're living together with someone. So universal credit is largely an online process, and there can be something good about that if we're okay with using the internet and applying online and running things maybe like an online bank account would be. That's all well and good. The department needs a little bit of persuading to deal with things on a more one-to-one level in terms of over the phone or by visits at the job centre. It's possible to make them do it, but it would make their lives easier if you could just go along with the online stuff. But of course the reality is that isn't where everybody's at for all kinds of different reasons. Technological access, ability, confidence, that sort of thing. So it's possible to get them to do it a different way, but their standard will be that things are going to be online. Roughly what universal credit does is it compares what your situation is with what the government thinks you need to live on, and depending on your circumstances, will make a regular payment on the same date each month, making some allowances for like bank holidays or slightly early payment over kind of non-banking days. For an example, I know this isn't super clear on the screen, but I can read it out to you. Someone who is between the ages of 18 and 25, some of the people we're thinking about who are kind of part of this conference, who doesn't have any housing costs. Maybe they're living at home or they're living in a way that means they don't have a liability for the rent. Maybe it's because they own their own house. You can find a lot of people 18 to 25 own their own house. And there's no particular additional needs because of health or disability or anything like that. The government says they would need £265.31 a month to live on. Gas, water, electric, TV, phone, food, washing. You can make your own decisions about how far something like that, 265 quid, might well go. For better or worse, one of the things the government says is that under the age of 25, there is a slightly lower amount than over the age of 25. I'm sure those of us in the room who've gone past our 25th birthdays will remember that time before we were 25 when we needed less money, and then suddenly we got to 25 and we needed more. It's a very familiar process for the adults in the room. We'll tell you younger people about it at some point. But anyway, we're stuck with what it says, what's on the cards, you know. To give you an example at the other end of things, if someone was in rented accommodation and they were getting like full help that's available towards the rent, and because of their experience of illness or disability or neurodivergence, they were accepted as being too ill to work, that amount every month would be about £1,214.58 at the minute. Most of that is on rent. The bit about being too ill to work has gone up by about £300 £300 a month. Even at that higher level, that is of course not like a large amount of money to live on or manage on. And particularly when there's additional needs out there, and that's why we're going to talk about the other big benefit that I thought I wanted to pencil in for you a little bit today, which is this one here. So, let's find people illustrate a little bit of what's going on. So this is personal independence payment is another big benefit that I thought would be worth touching base on with you. It's the benefit that takes over from disability living allowance, which is going to be payable to people under 16. But when people turn 16, so before they would kind of come to this transitional sort of route, they will already have been invited to move from disability living allowance onto personal independence payment. Or it could be that people are applying for the first time after turning 16, and it would be this benefit rather than disability living allowance. It's a benefit that's for people who are going to have difficulties with looking after themselves or getting out and about, and we'll explore a little bit more what that means together, because of a disability, and that's quite fixed language the law has. But in reality, that could be difficulties with physical activity. It could be difficulties arising from mental health. It could be difficulties arising from a learning disability. It could be difficulties arising from neurodivergence. And I think those will all be covered in the right way by personal independence payment. One of the most important things to underline is it's a benefit that's about the help that people need, which isn't always the same as the help that people get. So at two levels of that, people who live on their own and struggle are not disadvantaged because there isn't someone actually providing the help. They couldn't half do with it, but it's not quite available at the minute. Or also, we want to reassure people that applying for this benefit and talking about the difficulties that people are having and the additional needs they might have does not mean that anyone's going to force strangers to come in and start sort of washing their back or tying their shoelaces or being kind of forced into their life at all anyway. What we do in the process is help explain what people need, what people couldn't half do with, what would make life better were it available, and that's really where the rules are set at. So it's a little bit of an imaginative exercise, a classic NT benefit to that extent, because it involves being able to make some guesses about stuff that isn't quite there in reality. But again, with our support, with our help, we can try and help project people into that situation. One of the benefits of coming for support from a place like us with personal independence payment is the reality is people live their lives. We all live our lives as we do. And therefore people can get very used to living their lives in ways that are more restricted than they might have to be if the support was available. And so what we want to do is help people to explore what would be able to make their lives better, what would allow them to live more independent, more fulfilling lives, rather than feel that, well, okay, I am safe and I am managing looking after myself, but only by doing something very limited. I'd like to do something different. I'd like to try. I'd like to develop my independence. I'd like to be able to find a way of feeling better supported in doing it, but it's not available. But does that mean I don't have a problem with it, or does that mean it doesn't quite fit into the rules? Something that we're very happy to explore, because we're going to be coming from our different frame of reference of what our lives are like. And in exploring that with people, we can hopefully get them to understand, or hopefully get to a position where we can understand what can help support them in their lives to live more independently. Let's look at that in a little bit more detail. Some of the things the personal independence payment covers is, there's no way around it, it's fairly personal stuff, it's fairly intrusive stuff. It's not like massively different from disability living allowance and its nosiness, if people have ever investigated that. But it'll have a look, for instance, at how people are with cooking and with taking nutrition, eating and drinking in a normal kind of day-to-day English language. With cooking, it looks at whether someone is able to cook from fresh ingredients. So the shopping is magically in, the ingredients are there. Some kind of access to recipe we also imagine is there. But we're looking at the steps, whether those are the physical steps, chopping and peeling, whether those are some of the executive function steps of, okay, it's that, and then it's that amount of that, processing those kind of things in a way that reliably gets food at the end of it. Or even, of course, dealing with the way that either sensory overload or the crushing weight of anxiety and depression can get in the way of having the energy, the motivation, the concentration to do cooking. So the sorts of difficulties that personal independence payment is interested in capturing will include all of those different kind of areas. So not just the physical side of things, but will include other areas as well. Similarly, when it comes to washing, bathing, and then getting dressed, I could also indicate on there being able to get on and off the toilet safely, being able to get there in time, being able to kind of look after yourself by cleaning up as well. With these things, we again might be looking at physical difficulties. We again might be looking at executive processing difficulties. We might also easily be dealing with just a real low motivation, low energy, low drive to be able to kind of look after ourselves. When it comes to the idea of communicating and mixing with other people, whilst part of what personal independence payment is capturing is pure sensory disability, for instance, someone who's maybe very hard of hearing or profoundly deaf, but it will also capture people who are having difficulties in being able to express their needs, have those needs understood and heard by someone else. And when it comes to the idea of mixing, it's about not whether someone can just answer the door if Amazon drop a parcel around, but actually what's the nature of making new friends? What's the nature of having a chat with someone who looks interesting in the hairdressers whilst you're waiting for an appointment? How do you get on with officials? Sure, but also how do you, what are you able to do for fun? What are you able to access in terms of social resources on that side of things? That feels like an important, regular part of a lot of people's non-disabled, neurotypical activity. And so personal independence payment wants to recognise those as well. When it comes to getting out and about, it looks at difficulties, sure, with one foot after the other, physical mobilising, physical walking. So people who, as a result of their disability or additional needs, wheelchair users, absolutely, that's going to be important to bring into it. But it does also cover what the rules talk about in terms of planning and following journeys. So that's more likely to capture difficulties that people will have as a result of anxiety, that they might have as a result of difficulties with executive function and processing, difficulties with memory, difficulties with concentration, and again, difficulties with being able to interact. So the fact that you can, yes, move one foot after another from one place to another, okay, that's fine, but you can still be entitled to help with mobility in personal independence payment if the difficulties you're having means that maps aren't able to make sense, being able to translate something from the 2D written map environment into the 3D space of the roads, that's one thing. Or if anxiety means that every step you're kind of forcing yourself out of the house to begin with, you're at big risk of just that overwhelming you having to turn around and come home. Or people who get lost because of difficulties with kind of cognitive function as well. All this stuff can be covered as well as just the one foot after the other walking. There's a lot more to personal independence payment. That's a bit of a whistle-stop tour. Now, what I wanted to do is offer you a couple of examples, and then we're going to look at employment law, but a couple of examples of a few people we've helped. Right? We're going to pretend for a second that's Tina. That's not Tina. Her name isn't Tina. But we're going to use her as an example of someone who had difficulties with being able to work full-time. She was really up for it. She really wanted to. Had lots of good skills, but had a lot of bad experiences with employers who didn't seem to understand or offer support for additional needs. Then, when it came to universal credit, it turned out that the job centre weren't super understanding or super supportive and seemed to be asking and expecting her to do more than she was capable of doing with where she was. So with our help, we assisted in putting our foot down and complaining to the job centre about the way she was spoken to and the obligations that the job centre were making her kind of go through. We also got them to understand that they needed to accept that her difficulties meant working full-time was just not realistic. And then we also helped Tina to understand the way in which she can perfectly well be working part-time and still keep most of, not all, but most of her benefit in a way that she understood and could then empower her to be able to work out what she wanted to do and be treated with more respect and a bit more justice by the job centre at the same time. So Tina, an example there. We also have here another example on the benefit side of things. So we can talk about Zendaya here. So during the COVID pandemic, unfortunately, she lost her job. As a result of that, developed a very severe problem with anxiety. And actually, by the time we were in touch with her, she hadn't left the house like at all for 2 years. Not even sort of to go to the shops or any further than standing, looking out into the back garden. It had gotten very bad. As a result, she'd stopped feeling that she had the strength, the will to be able to kind of look after herself in terms of washing, bathing, opening the mail, eating right. She'd lost a lot of weight, had stopped being in contact with her friends, was feeling very isolated, and that was turning into a snowball of very negative experiences. Now, she'd recognised those difficulties, and she'd put in for personal independence payment. But the assessor spoke to her over the phone for about 20 minutes, half an hour, decided it didn't sound that anxious to me, and they said no benefit for her. However, we did help her with appealing, challenging that decision. We went to an independent tribunal. I think if we asked Zendaya about it, she'd say it was pretty stressful, but having done the right thing, put her foot down on that and kept going with our support, she ended up with over £10,000 worth of backdated benefit that she was entitled to and had been cruelly robbed of. So I thought that was a useful kind of sort of positive example about how things can work out. One of the reasons why we end up with kind of £10,000 or more backdated there for Zendaya in that example is okay, that is an amount of money each month, but actually it reflects just a long time of having to wait. Now we can try and be transparent with people about that process, and we can try and offer the support in terms of understanding what we're going to be going through, so we can at least kind of offer that clarity. But unfortunately, it is a very long, slow process, and the only silver lining to reward people's patience, they can get through it, is that benefit would be backdated as a result of the waiting period there. But tribunals are trying to catch up on things. They're burning the candle at both ends, if I can say that. There's some cases that were really limited, really held back by the pandemic. And there are some cases that they have tried to kind of catch more quickly when the evidence seems very strong immediately on the paper. But otherwise, most things in the middle are at a good 6 months or so. I do want to touch base, if I can, just a little bit on our employment law work, just to give you an illustration of that. So again, they're helping from initial advice about things that might be a problem that's emerging or a query someone has about their rights, all the way through to supporting them in the employment tribunal process. One of the things that we're not usually in a position to do is go along to internal meetings with employers. It usually isn't something that we're able to step in and do, but I'll touch base on that in a second. The sorts of issues we could be helping people with could be, as far as the question went before, unfair dismissal. Someone's actually lost their job, and is that legally fair? Has the right process been followed? Is there sufficiently understandable, valid legal reason for that happening? But we do also look at people getting their pay right, either what they were promised or how it's been calculated, or how overtime has been worked out, these kind of things. Or if a business has to shut down and someone's sadly made redundant, is their redundancy paid correctly? So we deal with kind of those figures entitlements as well. We also deal with giving people advice about their rights of kind of breaks at work and how those need to be sorted out. And those can be the standard breaks that everyone can be entitled to, but we'll also touch base when we kind of support people who might be being discriminated against. We'll support the idea of maybe when additional breaks can be requested, and how to look at supporting people to be able to get that extra help at work sometimes. There's a lot more to employment law potentially, but I thought I'd start us out with it. For some rights, sure, you do need to work for a same employer for a period of time before those kick in. One of the important ones where that's not true, though, is right the way from day one, you have the right not to be discriminated against at work. That might even happen before day one of work, Because, for instance, I thought this might be a useful thing to know. There's a change of a law the other year. And so employers now aren't allowed to ask questions about someone's health before otherwise saying yes to giving them a job or offering them a job. They are allowed to see if that can be done safely once the decision has been made. They're allowed to look at whether any additional support is going to be needed. But they do have to have made a decision that in principle, yes, this is the right person, this is who we want. And then, if details or information about health or additional needs come up and they suddenly, oh, no, actually something's happened there, we've filled that position, we don't need the person anymore. It's not, obviously, because of your health, it's not that. It's definitely not that. Don't ask us more questions about what it is. It's not that, right? This process hopefully makes employers a little bit more transparent in doing that. And in making sure that they are selecting people on the basis of their capacity to do the job and not unfairly making assumptions or not unfairly holding people's kind of health difficulties, disabilities or additional needs, neurodivergence against them. But one exception to that I hope is helpful to underline is employers are entitled to ask, and certainly when we go for job interviews we're entitled to ask, if we need additional support for the purpose of the interview, then that's something that we can bring up. And then that wouldn't, again, be something that could be held against people in terms of offering the job. But it's the one area where we're allowed to bring up or allowed to request something that might be a little bit additional. A moment ago when I talked about how we might not be able to come along to meetings with people whilst they're at work, I did want to touch base on this. It's not our service, but I think it's a really important message to be putting out there. Actually, for anybody who's at work, neurotypical, neurodivergent, additional needs or not, the best way of protecting your rights at work is to be in a union. Now, that used to be slightly old-fashioned when I got into working at SARC. They're cool again, their unions, I think, from what I see on TV, the young people there, it's quite fashionable again. And this is taken from the tremendous struggle that's going on for nurses to get paid properly for the job they're doing. People can join any trade union they like. Often, if there's a bunch of other people in the same workplace who are in the same union, that can make the strength and the power of the union a little bit better, but you always, even if you're the only person at work, you have an absolute right to join the union. And what that means is then the union can give you advice and support outside, but also, if anything ever happened, like if someone was in trouble and they needed some support at a meeting, they would have the right for the union to come with them. Or, other way around, if they needed to complain that something wasn't going right, then the union will be able to come into the meeting and support them with that. Unions do also have various other kind of bits of benefit and support that are available. Sometimes some hardship funds to deal with people on low pay. Sometimes some other kind of financial bonuses, like kind of access to reduced cost home insurance and things like that. There are different unions out there. Finding the right union might be keeping an eye out for posters at work, but also it can be by going and visiting the TUC, the Trade Union Congress, the national people in charge of unions. And there's a lovely link on their website where you explain who your boss is or what sort of job you do, and they'll give you a few ideas about unions that you might want to join. That's far and away the best advice I can give people to protect their rights at work. A couple of examples for you, and then we're getting somewhere. So, let's be thought this in, right? But we're going to pretend for a second that it is. So, Roger Cancius has been working in a shop. Because of his experience of neurodivergence, what he needed was a little bit better clarity about how shifts were going to be allocated and planned. That started out and was going fine. Unfortunately, then Roger got a new manager, and the new manager said, when he raised that she didn't care about his autism and didn't care about the arrangements, and he just had to get on with whatever shifts he was given. She didn't actually say she didn't care. She said something much ruder than that, which I'm not putting on the slide, but she certainly made it clear that was it. And if Raj didn't like it, well, then there's a door over there. Raj did not like it. He was extremely upset, extremely scared about what was going to happen, and he couldn't cope, and he left. But afterwards, he came to see us, and with our support, we took that shot to an employment tribunal, where it was agreed that he had been discriminated against unlawfully. That you cannot do that to people who meet the rules for being entitled to disability protection. He was awarded about £6,000 in compensation as a result. So hadn't been there very long, not super paid work, but that was the order that came through. Because of the way tribunals work, they don't have super strict rules like the county court or the high court or the crown court in terms of evidence. Now, someone recording something secretly runs the risk that it makes them come across a bit shifty, and it might be that that's its own kind of misconduct issue that might justify things coming to an end. But the main rule that the tribunal will look at is, is it valuable evidence about what happened? Is it valuable? And if so, then we might let it in.
And it's not going anywhere else anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. And it certainly was necessary because the employer, as I say, went for didn't happen, mate, didn't say that. So it helped demonstrate that, well, he did say that. A couple of quick examples, if that's all right. We're getting there. So we've got Sarah here, who was working in a pub. They were working there perfectly well for a period of time, but then a new owner came and took over the pub. And I'll call them Bill for a second. So Sarah came back after the weekend away and saw someone new behind the bar as the manager. And they said, "Oh, hi, I'm Sarah, I work here." And Bill said, "Well, no, you don't. I run this place and you don't have a job here at all. Don't come back in unless you're going to buy a drink." She'd been there about sort of 5 or 6 years, I think, under the old owners. Now, without going into a big lecture about how the law works, it ain't that, okay? So when a new employer takes over a company, they are obliged to take on with continuity the other members of staff. You can't do that. No one seems to have explained that to Bill until, again, we went to an employment tribunal where a judge explained it in very straightforward, simple terms relatively quickly. We managed to get the result through from there. So again, someone else helped out. I think we are just coming towards the end of the slides for us. I really want to underline that everything we do at SARC is free. We try and offer the same level of support that someone would get if they went to a solicitor or a barrister. We variously have kind of qualifications in and around that. So I've been doing a job for the last 14 years or so. I did some volunteering before that. Our boss Gary has been doing it for about 30 years, man and boy. Everything we do, though, is free from the point of view of the people we're helping out because of the way our funding is organised largely by the local authority and some other arrangements with citizens' advice. So our only rule instead of it being financial is you need to live in Southampton, and we mean by that people who either are liable for council tax to Southampton City Council or would be if they were paying council tax. So there are little pockets that sneak over into darkest Eastleigh. So we're in Woolston, just down the road in Bursledon. That does ever so slightly shift around bits of SO18 stuff into Eastleigh, stuff like that too. But in general, you live in Southampton and you're having a problem with benefits or employment law, we really want to be the people to help. We do work with other organisations, there's a bunch of them downstairs, to look at supporting clients in a joined up way that really tries to kind of deal with people's situations in a holistic, supportive manner. There may be other things going on as well as difficulties with benefits or problems at work, and although we don't have the expertise or pretend we have the expertise to sort them out, what we can do is try and work with other people and signpost and help refer, and we get that in the other direction ourselves too. Please do get in touch if you need us, and I'm just going to put this up. There is another slide afterwards, but it just says thanks for your time, so I might keep that off for a second. If you do need to get hold of us, I've got some leaflets with me and down the corridor if you want to have a look. Far and away, the best way of getting hold of us is through our website. So if you go to the website, there's a little web form to fill out to be able to outline what the issue is, and then we'll get back to you, hopefully, well within 5 working days. That's certainly our standard, and most of the time we manage quicker than that. Got 2 people off sick last week, so it got a little bit more jammed. It's entirely possible to get hold of us over the phone as well, but unfortunately, due to technical reasons at the minute, we only have 1 phone line coming in. So as soon as someone's on the phone with us, that's it, everyone else can't get through. Whereas the email side of things through the website, that is far and away the best way of getting hold of us. And then what we'll do is we'll arrange to have a bit of a chat. We can arrange an appointment, or we can do that, like I said at the start, face to face, or we can often help out over the phone or by video chat if that's where people would need to be for us. And on that note, I want to thank you for your time and for your attention, and yeah, that's it.
Thank you.